Let's move on to another story, a bit of a pivot, guys. But one story I'm watching today has been this global race to attract green investments. The latest headline here coming out of France, introducing a bill that would rival the Inflation Reduction Act here in the U.S. The country setting aside tens of billions of euros in tax incentives to accelerate the developments of clean energy. It also doles out bonuses for electric vehicles based on, number one, the energy makeup of the country where they're assembled, number two, the carbon footprint of the parts, as well as components, and then, of course, how much of those parts can be recycled. And if this sounds familiar, it's because so much has started to move as a result of the IRA being passed here in the U.S. And I want to point to a comment, guys, we got from the French finance minister, Bruno Le Maire, who said there's a new, more brutal form of globalization in which everyone defends their own interests with few scruples, and the U.S. and China are in a merciless technological, economic, and financial rivalry. His point being that Europe has to play in that as well. And if you look at all of the investments we've talked about since the IRA, this is kind of the new norm. If the U.S. passes a big package to attract onshoring of manufacturing, then Europe responds with another one. And we've sort of seen that in the chip space as well.
It's true, Akiko. And one thing I thought was interesting, there was a chart that I saw within this Bloomberg piece about, I didn't realize that only 10% of France's GDP was produced by manufacturing. So there's certainly room for them to try to gain some ground there. But to your point, right, you've seen different geopolitical, in different countries try to just go inward and, claim some territory.
And part of it's about what that funding allows these companies to do, right? You look at a company like First Solar that is expected to really benefit from the IRA. And just yesterday, Akiko, they bought a European company and the stock soared significantly on that news. If you take a look at a 2-day chart of First Solar, it went up massively over the last couple of days because it is expected to benefit from the Inflation Reduction Act. So when you think about what this means for some of the companies, First Solar hasn't necessarily seen it actually in their earnings yet. They were talking about that a lot a couple weeks ago, but they do think it's coming down the line, and that stock has been on a wild ride for over a year now because of how it can benefit from that government involvement.
Yeah, I think looking at those stocks in the back half of the year is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out in terms of those investments. But yeah, Kiko, going back to that French minister quote, I mean, brutal form of globalization, no scruples. It was very intently worded. And I do think this just goes back to that act being passed and how the U.S. has really set the precedent here that others will follow.